I was on watch the night the Periscope showed us a shape that hadn't been born yet, or at least that's what it felt like in the dark that followed. The thing that looks like the future always arrives at dawn. You learn a few practical truths quick on a sub. A wrench left in a bilge will kill you, a seized valve will ruin a patrol, and routines are the only real religion. Then you learn the other rules, the ones the manuals never print. Ours started as an order delivered flat and final from the captain. Do not look through the periscope at dawn. He said it like a surgeon passing a scalpel and left the room without dramatics. We obeyed because on a boat, a captain's voice is a small, enforceable law. A captain's quiet command is heavier than any shout. I was a mechanic then, grease under my nails, ears tuned to the harmonics of pumps and the cough of an old diesel. Periscope checks were part ritual, part maintenance, raise, sweep, log, lower. We timed exposures to seconds. We synchronized watches. We made a religion of brevity because the sea is not patient with indulgence. But rules collect corners, and corners breed curiosity. Someone always tests the edge. Procedures keep you alive. Curiosity will make you look. It began with film. Corby, our radio tech who handled tapes like a man handling evidence, pulled a reel after a dawn sweep and found one frame that didn't belong to our world. A silhouette, upright on a plane of water, as if the ocean had a deck for it to stand on. Sonar logged nothing. Radar logged nothing. The film had grain and sun glare, all the honest marks of a real exposure, and then a human shape where nothing should be. The captain put that reel in an envelope and told us, do not open it except in his presence. We watched it in a dim wardroom with coffee gone cold. When the mouth of the image filled the screen, the room went very small. One frame can reconfigure what you consider possible. After that, the rule hardened. No periscope exposures between first light and 20 minutes after sunrise, unless a senior officer signed off. It read like prudence, but felt like a lid on a pan you could hear starting to boil. Men who disobeyed weren't hauled before a court. They were made to forget by slower, quieter means. Harder watches, the captain's cold eye, the social erasure that comes from being the one who risks everyone. Discipline on a submerged machine is surgical. Punishment in a sealed place is quieter and crueler than any public reprimand. We did everything we could to keep this mechanical. Check optics, recalibrate prisms, grease bearings, run cross-checks with the bridge camera. The machine passed. The evidence would not be explained by broken glass or bad solder. The periscope was clean. The imagery kept returning anomalies exactly when the light was the most honest, dawn. That fact turns a technical problem into a question that feels religious. When the machine is clean, you stop trusting machines. Small incidents became a pattern. A petty officer named Semyon looked through the eyepiece for a single sweep and came back like a man who'd been slapped. He stopped singing on his bench and called the dawn sky a thin edge. Igor watched once and later said he'd seen a child standing on the water. He never took the periscope watch again. Men touched the cap as if it were a talisman. Then a man disappeared. Vitka was gone one morning. Maintenance logs showed the periscope had been lifted at 03:59 for exactly 8 seconds. Nobody authorized it. Nobody saw it. A scrap of paper, shaky handwriting, a smear of salt was slid under a bunk. It waits for the eye. When the light rises, it rises too. A missing man turns a mechanic's checklist into an accusation. We fixed what we could. We could not fix what looked back. One recording ended with a face so close to the lens that it filled the frame. Not a human face in the ordinary sense, but a mouth like a wound, a void where the mouth should be. The reel snapped like a severed line. The projector lamp cooled, and we all smelled the same thing, stopped breath. The captain's explanation was a whisper. That is why you do not look through the periscope at dawn. Sometimes the thing you record is the only truthful witness you'll ever have. Then the boat itself spoke. One night, the periscope warning bell, the one that chirps when the mast is on its way up, rang, even though the mast was down and locked. The internal speaker crackled with a layered voice that spoke Russian, then answered the captain's own order in his voice. Raise the periscope. The captain ripped power to the mast. The speaker screamed, metallic, a thing made from the wrong parts, and the hull shuddered. We emergency surfaced. The bow broke the surface, and for a moment, dawn was erased. The sky blinked out as if someone had closed the world's eyelid. The captain's face was white when he said what he'd thought only in private. It followed us up. When the sea learns to mimic your voice, your choices are already too late. After that, envelopes multiplied. Not tidy reports, but scraps and reels hidden in lockers, labeled restricted, do not release. The Navy filed public records that said little, and internal reports that said more, but were folded into classified storage. Men were reassigned. Producers who tried to air footage found hard drives that died or footage that went missing. You learn how institutions translate alarm into paperwork, and how paperwork is a way of making terror quiet for the public. But the private evidence, the reels, the notes, the single frames stayed behind in the captain's safe and in the pockets of men who still believed in proof. The machine eats the story and returns silence. We tried explanations that kept us from losing our minds. Optics can lie, the young navigator said. Refraction, spray, lens flare. Science muttered about bioluminescent blooms and reactive photonics. Ice researchers pointed at anomalous filaments and spectra that wouldn't fit existing categories. All of these were true in parts, and none of them closed the seam. The pattern that mattered was the timing. Dawn, the one time the captain told us not to look, and the shape it showed. The coincidence tasted like intent. Language cures some dread. It rarely cures all of it. Sometimes the periscope gave us mirrors. Men saw things that belonged to them. A child at the horizon, a friend's face in the spray. Mirrors are dangerous because they are private weapons. You will spend nights arguing to yourself that what you saw was your longing, not a thing outside. The boat grew full of private confessions that had nowhere to land. Someone would write a note and tuck it under a bunk. Someone would tuck a reel into an envelope. We learned to keep our eyes closed if dawn was near, because seeing was not neutral. It changed the watcher. What you look at sometimes becomes who you are. The sequence that convinced me, the one that made a mechanic into a witness, happened during a patrol where the hull gave us a rhythm that didn't belong to any engine. The boat hummed, and then the hum echoed back a half-second late, like a copied heartbeat. Sonar showed nothing. We went to periscope depth because the captain chose to outrun the absurdity, but he ordered that nobody look. We raised the mast and recorded 5 seconds under his direction. When we replayed the film, we watched a figure pivot on the horizon, come closer, and fill the lens with a mouth that wasn't a mouth. The reel cut. Then something began to knock at the hull from outside. At first, 3 slow knocks, then a staccato that followed us as we dove. We went deep until the hull groaned and the pressure hurt. The knocking stopped only when we'd taken ourselves far below the light. For days after, men woke with their hands clenched. You can ignore a voice. You cannot ignore a knock. The boat was a closed ecology of proof and superstition. The captain tried to cage it. Sign nothing, place sensitive tapes in sealed envelopes, hand them to him. He tried to make the unknown a ledger entry. He failed. The unknown presses against ledgers like water through a seam. Men who had been reassigned returned with blank eyes. Films that once existed vanished from edit rooms. The small human disasters, the men who stopped being themselves, the men who disappeared, outpaced any bureaucratic neatness. Paperwork is a machine for converting alarm into silence. When I left the Navy the next year, I told myself I was leaving the hull and the noise behind. I signed clearances, boxed tools, folded uniforms. But the letters, the reels, the folded scraps lodge in you. On certain mornings, I awake with the hull of that old boat under my feet and a want in my mouth not to look. Once, in a cheap motel, I heard a faint whoomp-whoomp in the plumbing and imagined the periscope head rising. I closed my eyes. I learned then what the captain meant. Not looking is not cowardice. It is a small, necessary mercy. You can obey the manuals and still be unprepared for what looks back. If you ask me now what the periscope showed, the reels and the notes, the face and the void, I'll give you two answers. The mechanic's answer is procedural. Check optics, recalibrate, log anomalies, seal evidence, obey the chain of custody. The human answer is simpler and colder. Some things in the light are not meant for your eye. The periscope showed us a question we couldn't answer. Who watches the watcher when dawn comes? The sea kept sending its notes in whatever medium it chose, and the more we listened, the fewer of us remained recognizable. So I keep the rule of the way you keep a scar. If you ever find yourself on a boat with a camera that promises to show you the horizon's secret, and if someone tells you not to look at dawn, believe them. There is dignity in leaving an envelope sealed. There is safety in closing a lid on a pan that's starting to steam. The future the periscope showed us was not a map, it was a summons. We answered once, and some of us were counted differently after. I keep my eyes closed now, until the sun has already had its say.